Hey there, this is Kamal, and in this video we'll learn about Git. So let's get this started. Alright, so first things first, what is Git? So Git is a version control system. So essentially what it means is that it's a software which keeps track of all the changes that we do inside our project. And by doing so, it gives us the ability to go back to any of the particular version of our project. So let's imagine a scenario where you had completed a part of your project and it's working perfectly. Then you made some changes to it, and because of that, some errors have occurred and the project is not working correctly. And if you have to remove all those errors manually, then that becomes a tedious task, as you have to go back and trace each and every step that you had taken and undo all of those changes. So that's where Git is used, as it keeps track of all the changes that we had done. We can just directly go back to the point where a project was working correctly, and then we can just update from there again. And then we can just make the changes from there once again and make sure that this time there is no errors. So one more thing is that people often get confused about Git and GitHub. So Git is a version control software, whereas GitHub is a place where we keep all of our project code. So generally, programmers use Git to keep track of all of the changes that they had done in that project and upload that code file to GitHub, and from the GitHub repository, other team members can access that file and make their own changes. So that's how Git and GitHub are interlinked and they are used. So now with that out of the way, let's get this started. Okay, so the first thing that you have to do is that you have to download Git. So if you're on a Windows system, you can just directly go and type in download Git. You can type this inside your browser and open the first link. There you have the option to download Git for Windows, Mac OS and Linux. So the process for installing Git is different on Mac OS, Linux and Windows. So if you're on a Windows system, you can just click on this and that's going to download the installer. So once you have downloaded that, you can right click on it and start the installation. So the installation is pretty easy. You can just leave everything as default and click on next and carry on with that, and that's going to be installed onto your system. And if you're on a Linux based system, mainly Ubuntu, you can just open your terminal and then type in sudo apt install Git, and that is going to install Git onto your system. Okay, so before seeing the commands that we're going to use, let's first create a dummy project. So let's go to my desktop, and in here I have a folder called as Git crash course. So I'm going to open that, and in this let's create a new file. So let me open this inside my code editor. Alright, so let me create a new file and I'm going to name it as index.html. So let me generate a boilerplate template and let's type in a h1 tag and let's give it as testing. That's it. That's what we're going to have here. Okay, so now let's open the terminal and go to the location where we have this file. So I'm going to go to that folder where we have the project. So let me cd into desktop, and inside desktop there's a folder called as Git crash course. So let me go into that folder, and in here I have a file called as index.html. So now let me clear this, and now, so there's actually three main commands that you have to use so that you can make Git to keep track of all the changes that you make inside your project. The first command is git init. So this is going to create a Git repository inside your project structure. So if you go back to my project structure, in here as you can see there's a folder called as .git. And by default, this folder is hidden. So in order to actually see that in Ubuntu, you have to click on Ctrl H and that's going to show the hidden folders. And in Windows, you have to go to options at the top bar, and there you have to check the hidden items so that you can see all of these files. But you don't actually need to make any changes inside this folder. You just need to know that it's there. Okay. So now let's hide this once again and go back. So the second command that you have to know is git add dot. So what this is going to do is that it's going to take all the changes that you had made and make it so that they are ready to be added to the repository. Okay, so there's actually three things that you have to know about git add. The first thing is that git add space dot is going to add everything inside your current project to the staging area. That is, it's going to make it so that every change is available to be added to the repository. The next command is git add filename.ext. So what do I mean by that is that if you want to add a particular file to the staging area, then you can do that as well. Like let's say I want to add just the index.html, then I can type in index.html and only that particular file will be added to the staging area. So by that, it means that only this change will be added to the repository and every other change that you had made will be discarded or will not be considered. The third git add is called as git add star, and then you can give in all the extensions that you want to use. So let's say I can give it as .txt. So by this, what it means is that it's going to add all the files which have an extension that is txt, that is a text file. So all the text files will be added to the staging area. So that's about git add. So the last command that you have to know is called as git commit. But before doing this, let's first know about another command called as git status. So what this is going to do is that if you click on enter, as you can see here, there's a file called as index.html which is present inside the staging area and it has to be committed. So by committed, it means that this file, that is index.html, has to be added to the local repository that we had just created using git init. Okay, so you can use git status at any point to get to know about the status of all the current files. Okay, so now let's type in git commit. Then you have to type in -m, give a space, and inside the quotations, you can give any message that you want to use. So let's say I can type in. So this initial commit is a message that I'm going to type to make it so that it's easy for me to identify this particular commit. So it's like a name that I'm going to give to this particular commit, or you can say it's a comment. Okay. So the syntax is git commit -m. And in the quotations, you have to give the message. So once you're done this, you can click on enter. And what it's going to do is that it's going to add all of these files onto the local repository. So now Git has already taken and added all of these changes that it had done to the local repository. And now you can use that and you can go back to a particular version, or you can do anything that you want. But let's say you want to collaborate with some other person, then you have to take this local repository and upload it online. Right? So in order to do that, you have to actually go to GitHub. So let's go to GitHub, and in here, let's create a new repository. So if you don't have a GitHub account, then you have to create one. And once you've created that, you can go to the repository section and you can create a new repository. So inside this, let me give it a name called as git crash course. And I'm going to make this public. And I'll leave everything as it is. I'm not going to check anything else, and I'll click on create repository. So as you can see here, that repository has been created. And if you scroll down, they're going to provide you with a URL that you can use. Okay. And apart from that, there's also a few commands available here. And as you can see here, these are the commands that we are actually using right now. So we have git init, we have git add, we have git commit. So these are the three commands that we had seen just now. Apart from that, another two commands that we're going to use is git remote add origin and git push origin. Okay, so you can use this as well. So now let's go back to the terminal, and in here, in order to actually push this repository onto this GitHub repository that we had just created, what you have to do is that you have to type in git remote add GitHub space quotations, and inside this quotations you have to copy and paste this URL that you had just received. Okay, so this is the same URL that you have inside the URL bar. Okay, so you can go there and type this inside the quotations. So what this command essentially does is that it's going to establish a link between the local repository and online repository, that is online GitHub repository. So here, this git remote add is the syntax, and this GitHub is the name that we're providing to this particular remote. And this is the URL that we're going to use to connect. Okay, so now click on add, and that's going to add and establish a link. So now you have to type in git push, and then you have to type in the remote name, that is GitHub, and then you have to give the branch name. And by default, it will be master. So if you're creating this repository for the first time, then the branch that you're going to be working on is called as master. So you can type that in and you can click on enter. And by now, if you're using this Git for the first time, then it's going to ask for your username and password. So there's going to be a dialog box here, and in that you have to type in the username, password, and you have to click on enter, and that's going to validate your credentials, and then it's going to open GitHub, and then it's going to start publishing that repository. So since mine is a Ubuntu system, it's going to ask for username and password each and every time that I try to upload it. So let me do that quickly. So as you can see here, the publishing has been done. And now if you go back to the project once again, and as you can see here, if you refresh the page, you have the file called as index.html. And this is the message that we had given to the commit, that is initial commit. Okay. And one more thing that I forgot to tell you is that sometimes it's better to add the global username and password as well. So if you scroll to the top here, as you can see here, there's a few commands, right? There's a command called as git config global username. So by using this command, you can actually set the global username and global email to this particular username and email that you provide. And by doing so, whenever you use Git inside any project inside your system, if you try to use Git and upload or make any changes, then it's going to automatically take the username and password and you don't need to manually type that in. Okay, so you can use these two commands as well if you want. So that's how you actually publish or push the data or the files directly onto GitHub. So now let's say you don't want to actually push your own data, but instead you want to take the files or code from other person's repository. So you can do that if that particular repository is open or public. So if that particular repository is public, then you can directly take that code and download it and use it however you want. So to do that, what you can do is that you can go back to this command line once again, and in here there's a command to actually download that onto your system as well. It's called Git Clone. And then you have to give a space, and in this quotations you have to provide the URL of that particular repository that you want to download. So let's say I just want to download this repository once again. I can just go to code, click on this, and in here you have the HTTPS URL, right? Copy this URL, then inside this quotations, place that URL and click on enter. And what it's going to do is that it's going to download that particular project onto your system at this particular location, that is desktop, inside the Git crash course folder. Okay, so you can do that if you want. And whenever any change is made inside that open repository, that is that public repository, what you can do is that you can type in Git Pull, and it's going to take all of the changes that is there inside the remote repository that is present on GitHub and add all of those changes onto the local repository that you had just downloaded. So these are the two commands that you have to use if you want to use another person's repository on your own system. So all of this is well and good. But let's say you're working on a large scale project and you have multiple team members working on that particular project itself. So if you have multiple people working on that particular project, then obviously there'll be multiple commits and multiple changes being done to the code. And because of that, if there's any error in any one person's code, then that's going to break the whole project itself. So in order to avoid these complications, what you can do is that you can take this project and divide it into subparts. So right now, as I've said earlier, by default, we'll be working on a branch called as master. So as you can see here, we are currently on the branch master. But if you want, you can create another branch as well. And a branch is nothing but a copy of the original repository. So right now we had this index.html file, right? So you can create a copy of this and use that particular copy and make those changes that you want on that particular copy. And any changes that you make on that copy will not affect the original master branch. Okay, so the way that you create a branch inside Git is you have to type in Git, then type in branch and the branch name. So let's say I'm going to give mine as testing. I'll give as Git branch testing and click on enter, and that's going to create a branch. So now in order to use that branch, you have to type in Git checkout testing. So what it's going to do is that it's going to shift the head of our Git onto this branch. That means it's going to change our working branch from master to testing. So if I click on this, as you can see here, we have switched the branch to testing. So now let's go back to the project, and in here, let's create another file. I'll call it as readme.md. And let me give it a heading. Okay, so this is a standard markdown structure. So I have created a file called as readme.md. So now if I try to publish this, so what I'll go do is that I'll give it as git add everything, and that's going to add everything. Then git commit -m, I'll give the message. And And since we already have the remote established, you don't need to type the remote once again. You can just directly go to Git Push GitHub, which is the remote itself, and the branch name. And this time, since we're trying to update the branch testing, we're going to type in testing instead of master. Before we had typed in Git Push GitHub master, but this time we're going to type in Git Push GitHub testing. So if I type in enter, so now as you can see here, the code has been updated and pushed to the branch called as testing. So if I go to the browser once again and refresh the page, as you can see here, there's no change inside the master branch. But now if I click on this, there's another branch called as testing. So if I go to that branch, as you can see here, we have another file called as readme.md, which is present only on the branch testing. And there's also an message here showing that testing had recent pushes less than a minute ago. So you can compare and pull request. So what it means is that since the data present on this testing branch is different from the master branch and it's ahead, or the data that is present inside the testing branch is newer than the master branch, if you want, you can directly take the data from the testing branch and add that data to the master branch. So that's what this message implies. Okay. And this is what we are going to do next as well. So let's open the command prompt once again. So once you're done with testing out the code and making all the changes inside the branch called as testing, if you want, you can merge the testing branch and the master branch so that this code is available on the master branch as well. Okay, so the way that you actually merge these two branches is called as git merge, and then you have to give the branch name, which is testing. If I click on that, okay, so the thing is that you have to first go back to master branch before you can merge it. So in order to do that, you have to first check out to the master branch. So now the branch head has been shifted to master. So now you can merge the testing branch onto the master branch. One thing that you have to keep in mind is that if there are any uncommitted changes inside this testing branch, then you can't go back to the master branch before you commit those changes. So first you have to commit those changes to the testing branch, and once they are done, you can go back to the master branch. So now you can type in git merge testing. So as you can see here, the changes has been done. So now if I type in git push GitHub master, and now I'm trying to update the master branch, and I'll click on enter. So as you can see here, those changes have been added to the master branch. So now if I go to the browser and refresh the page, as you can see here, we have the readme.md file inside the master branch as well. So this will be quite useful if you want to make multiple copies of this main project and make it available for each and every team member. So each and every team member can work on a particular branch, and once that particular branch has been done or that particular code has been finalized, you can merge that code onto the master branch. And since it is independent, it's not going to affect the master branch until it's in development phase. Okay, once it is finished, then you can merge that to the master branch. So one last thing that you have to know before ending this off is, let's say there are some particular files inside a project that you don't want to upload onto GitHub. So since GitHub has a size limit, and that size limit is I think 100 MB, so you can't upload any file or any folder which exceeds 100 MB. So in order to stop those files from being uploaded, what you can do is that you can create another file called as .gitignore. So in here, let me create a new file. So let me go back to the project structure. In here, let me create a new file called as .gitignore. So inside this .gitignore, you can type in the name of any file or any folder that you don't want to be uploaded onto GitHub. So generally, if you're working on node projects, then inside the node projects, you have a folder called as node modules, which is going to contain all the node modules that you're going to use inside the project. But since they are actually quite large, we don't generally upload them directly onto GitHub. But instead, you're just going to upload all the remaining files. And whenever you deploy that particular project code onto the server, in that server, you can type in npm install, and those node modules will be directly installed onto the server. So you don't actually keep those normal node modules files or environment files or any other files inside the GitHub. Okay. So what you can do is that, let's say I don't want, let me create a new file here. Let me create as testing.html. So let's say if I don't want this testing.html being uploaded to GitHub, what I can do is that inside this git ignore, I'll type in testing.html and I'll save that. And if I go to the terminal once again, in here, let's type in git add dot, then git commit. So now if I type in git push, so if I go to the browser once again and refresh the page, so as you can see here that git ignore has been added and this testing.html wasn't added. And that is because we added that testing.html inside the git ignore, so that file will not be uploaded. The same thing can be done for a particular folder as well. So you can just type in the folder that you don't want to be uploaded onto GitHub and that folder will not be uploaded. You can even type in star.txt and that's going to make it so that all the txt extension files will not be uploaded as well. Or you can type in HTML or any other file that you want. So that's how you use Git to keep track of all the changes that you make inside your project, and also use GitHub to actually upload your code and make it available for your teams to work on. So that's it for this video guys. I hope you have liked what you've seen till now. If you did, then please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe as well. Thanks so much for watching and I hope to see you in the next video.